Hey, what's up? Welcome to Fathering Our Future. I'm Anthony Vandegrift, and I'm not the perfect dad, but every day, just like you, I am trying to be better. We're continuing our series on having the talks with our kids about sex and sexuality, and I'm so excited to share the conversation that I got to have with my good friends, Adam and Karissa King. They are the hosts, and they are the founders of the podcast, Dear Young Married Couple. This conversation is exceptional. This conversation is going to help you understand how you can model this example that helps your kids understand better sexuality within the framework of marriage. But there's also some really good takeaways on how we can have this conversation verbally with them and help them understand the beauty of God's design, marriage, and how sex fits within all of that. And it's something worth celebrating. I want to break in real quick and let you know how much I appreciate you listening to the podcast. My prayer is that I can be a help and a blessing to you on your fatherhood journey. So if you're not already subscribed to the podcast, go ahead and subscribe. And if at any point you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me via email at fatheringourfuture@gmail.com. And if you want other good content, you can go to the website, check out the blog, and other free resources. Thank you again for listening. Be blessed. Do you remember when you became a dad and all of a sudden those New Balances just hit differently? There's something about fatherhood that impacts your wardrobe, and I'm happy to share that I can help you with that now. Fathering Our Future now has merch. We have sweatshirts and hats and other pieces of clothing that you will enjoy sporting as a father. Just go to fatheringourfuture.com, select merch, or click the link in the description of this episode and get you something that you will enjoy and be proud to wear as a dad. Dad, I want you to know I care about you and I am on your side. So I have a free gift for you. I have put together a 7-day devotional, extracted from my devotional, Following Our Father, to help you realign your identity as a dad to be the dad that God has called you to be and that your children need you to be. Simply click the link in the description below and get your free 7-day devotional. Well, Adam and Karissa, it is so much fun to have you back on the podcast. Thank you for being with me.
Man, it's a pleasure and honor.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. We love the fact that you do this podcast specifically for dads, and we love your work. We love your devotional that you just came out with.
Yeah, dads are an underserved demographic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'm appreciative of what you do because I think you help men significantly even while they are dads because you focus so much on marriage. And I think the better you are at being a husband, probably the better you will be as a dad. So I am very appreciative for your work as well. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation. We're continuing my little series that we're doing on what I've called Having the Talk. They're talking to your kids about sex. But one of the things that I have learned and one of the things that you focus on, I'll give you a good opportunity to talk about this in just a little bit, is that this is not a one-off conversation. This is not the traditional, hey, boy, come sit down. I'm going to tell you what that thing is for and how babies are made, and then we're never going to talk about this again. And that's typically how those conversations have played out. I didn't get one, but from all my buddies who did, it was pretty awkward. So anyway, before we get into all the fun stuff, let's start here. How about you tell me what's new over in your life?
Man, what's new? Personally or professionally?
All of the above. I know you're starting to write a book. That sounds fun.
Yeah, we are writing a book. Actually, Dear Young Married Couple started as a book. I remember what trail we were on. We were hiking in the middle of the forest, and we're like, we should write a book. And I'm like, yeah, let's do that. We started talking about it, and then the next question, of course, was, well, who is going to listen to two kids about marriage? Even though she had at that point been a therapist for like 6 years or so,
something like that.
And so we're like, well, we'll probably have to market it, and we came up with this idea of what if we interviewed people on what makes marriages great again. And so that's what we ran with. We started asking people what makes marriages wonderful, and never wrote the book.
We just curated all the advice and put it on Instagram and podcasts.
So yeah, once we got into this thing, so now that we're writing the book, it's actually really fun. It's taken shape, and I'm encouraged.
It's been fun
Good.
so far. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of what's in the works. Working with a lot of guys, just around addiction or pornography, discipline, lust, all that stuff. I'm loving that work. And
Yeah.
personally, I just decided I'm going to climb a mountain. So we're going
All
to
right.
really start kicking butt for that goal.
Working on, preparing for Mount Shasta. So that'll be fun.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've learned that, like, I don't like just let's go run. I'm like, I can think of better things to do with my time than run. And or like, let me go throw some heavy things around in the garage. I do it just because I know I don't want to be weak, and I like being active, and I like doing stuff. I'm sporty, but I like playing things.
Sure.
And so I was like, I have to have a goal, or I'm not going to do it. So we made I'm going to climb Mount Shasta in the summer.
Yeah.
So what are the details of this mountain? How high are we talking?
It's 14,279 feet. I think it
Nice.
is. And I'm super stoked. It's a legit mountain. You have to like take a ice pick and those crampons, the grippers for your feet, and it could blizzard up there while you're there, and it could be in the middle of the summer. It's pretty intense. My uncle
awesome.
almost died on it, so it's gonna be a good thing.
Sounds like it's gonna be a whole lot of fun.
It is. I'm excited.
Yeah, I hope you're around for the next time we get together, so that it's Adam and Karissa on the podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm climbing it with them.
She's
No offense to
going.
Karissa, but this might be the last ever podcast.
Yes. Now we know where they
that's
died.
Exactly. Well, the
And
story's
then-
out. News is already broken.
Exactly.
A good personal and professional overlap that I'm really thankful for is we've been traveling with the kiddos a lot more over the last 12 to 18 months or so, since we made a big
Fun.
shift in our priorities and the way that we commit or say yes to or no to speaking
Our best
engagements.
yes.
Yep. So our speaking engagements have looked different, and I've liked it. We miss some of what we used to do, but we've made a
Sure.
commitment that our regional events are the only events, and then our Power Couples retreat are the only events where we're speaking without bringing the kids. And then other than that, we're taking the kiddos anytime we say yes to a speaking engagement. So that's been really fun.
That's very cool.
Wow.
Karissa,
Yeah.
I think you remember Ryan O'Neill from the Bible quizzing days.
Yep.
He travels the world with his 3 little kids. I think his
Nice.
daughter, by the time she was 9 months, had been to 4 times as many countries as I have been to in my entire life. I don't know how he
That's
does
awesome.
it. But he's given some pretty good advice on the podcast before. But
Very
no, I'm
cool.
excited. I'm excited about what's going on in your life. I know you'll kick the mountain's butt, even though it might be fun training for it. I know you'll do it. But I'm excited about the book too. I think that'll be cool. It's interesting that it started with a book idea, and then the podcast is what ultimately came to be. But the benefit is that you've had years of research for the book, so it should come along pretty well. I'm excited for
Yes.
y'all, and
Thank you.
I am also excited about this conversation. So we're talking about, we'll call it the talks for this sake of the interview, because that's really what it is. And I'm trying to think where I want to start. Let me start here. I know that you have already created a resource for this, and I'll give you an opportunity to go ahead and talk about it. Your resource is called Having the Talks, and it's conversational cards, is my understanding, which
Mhm.
I think are great. I've promoted them on the podcast before as a great resource, because I don't think we have to have it all figured out as fathers, and I don't think we ever will. So tapping into other people who have done a service for us, I think, is a very wise thing. So tell me a little bit about Having the Talks, what it looks like, what it goes into, how it helps us as dads.
All right. So the Having the Talks card deck is a game, and we designed it. We had someone design it, and it just looks like a game. So the kids love pulling the box out and like, let's play the talks game.
Okay, that's cool.
There's a fun story actually behind that.
Go ahead.
One of our friends said they had put having the talks deck, with all their other board games, and her dad, the kids' grandpa, was over and was like, yeah, let's play a game. And they're like, Grandpa, let's play the talks. And they pull it out, and Grandpa's like,
Old school.
Having
what
a heart
is this
attack.
game?
Yeah. You know what? But this also like brings a really good point in principle is that the kids don't know that that's not, that they don't know that that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
They don't know that that's taboo.
Yep.
That you're a safe source. You've taught them everything else they know. Why should this thing be anything different?
Yeah.
That's good.
And so when you go into that with that mindset, and the kids are just excited to be having a conversation with daddy about their own body or about their identity or about their sexuality or about who they like, and, all these aspects of human sexuality, it's just having a conversation that's super interesting, because who doesn't like to learn about themselves and what will happen and what the desires that they didn't know they had, or, they're trying to put names to. Yep. So it's a really powerful thing to have these conversations with kids that, just trust you. They know to trust you. And so it may be weird for you because we didn't get this stuff.
For sure.
But it's not weird for them.
Yeah. And it's designed specifically for ages as young as 3. So on here it says ages 3 and up, and then as old as teen and launching into adulthood. So the way that we accomplished that was each card has a caterpillar side, and each card has a butterfly side. So here's the little key there. There's a caterpillar and a butterfly. So it's the same question, but asked in a different way for an older kid. So the caterpillar side, how did God make you special? So that's ages 3 to whatever you decide is caterpillar for your kid. So when we beta tested them, we found that our beta testers switched to the butterfly side somewhere around age 9 or so. And it just depended on the kid and how many talks they've had so far. And then the other side for older kids and teens, what do you think it means to be made in the image of God? So that's the butterfly side. So as you can see, the deck is about a lot more than just sex. We open the whole thing up with identity. Question number 2, for the caterpillar, why do we read our Bible and pray? Who is Jesus? And then for the butterfly, other than your name, how would you answer the question, who are you? So again, we're just focused on identity for the first chunk in the deck.
And so the first chunk, it goes from identity, the anatomy, hygiene, health, puberty, physical development, reproduction, conception, birth, puberty, boundaries and dating, celebration of sex and marriage, general communication, social and emotional development, and when things don't go as God planned. So we're trying to really equip the kids for what they're going to encounter in life, what they will encounter in life. Especially where we live, it's California. It's
not God's country.
No, it's the land of fruit and nuts. It really, you get everything here, and the kids are curious. And so it's going to open conversations. So it's really not, if you're going to have conversations, or if they're going to bring you questions, it's going to be like, can you answer them? Are you willing to answer them and equip them?
Yeah, that's good. Because if you don't, someone else is going to. And then
that's right.
At that point, I don't think you reserve the right to think to yourself, why are they the way that they are? Well, if you didn't have anything to do with it, then I don't think you can complain about it either.
Exactly. Well, it's really, let me just jump off this. We actually did a marriage seminar in Jordan, in the Middle East, in Jordan. And we were talking about, and this came up, and we were really trying to be careful talking about these different things, and teaching your kids came up as a question. And we started talking about well, how many of you think it's a really good idea to teach your kids sound financial management? Everybody raise their hand. What about stewardship around money? That's pretty much the same thing. What about investments? They raise their hand. What about building a business that does well, and teaching them. And we spend a lot of time guiding them into a fabulous career. We teach them about college, whatever those things are, what we think our values are. I find it incredible that we don't spend more time on sexuality, since it will affect their life the same, if not more, as that career. And so, and we asked that question in Jordan, so how many of you have had a conversation with their kids around sex? No one raised their hand. And we've done that now because we were like, that was a really good question. So we've asked that several times now at our different retreats, and very few parents that haven't been pushed to do it, because everybody's pretty much nervous because we didn't get that. And I think that's why we hold back. I mean, the stats show that a lot of people don't get that talk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely did not, but I can certainly attest to the negatives of not having that guidance, because then everything is learned either from peers or pornography, and both are incorrect on what we actually need to know about sex and sexuality, and even identity in that context. It's all misplaced. So
that's right.
I have come to the place, the more I have focused on fatherhood, where I realized that this is not something that I can just overlook, especially, as fathers, Christian fathers. Our mission is to make disciples. And if we're making disciples, this falls under that umbrella. We can't just give guidance and leadership in certain places that we deem worthy and then say, well, the rest they could just figure out on their own. That's not truly discipling our kids, not in my opinion. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation. And you brought up such a good point. I do want to jump back to the game and ask a question real fast, but I want to pigtail off something that you said. So is this a game that you play in order? Just because you've created a flow to it, it doesn't sound like maybe the best idea is to shuffle the cards up and then to just go.
You can.
Okay.
So,
but maybe not the first time through.
You could. So parents have approached it different ways. When they beta tested it, we asked them to tell us, how did you play the game? Because there's lots of ways to do it. Some parents went through and picked 5 cards that they felt comfortable and confident to answer. Okay. And then they kind of spread the 5 cards and let the kids pick a card from the deck without realizing the parents only selected 5 cards. Right. So that's one way to do it. Some parents will just leave the entire deck on the coffee table or the kitchen table, and then at dinner or when they're all together for family time, they can just grab a card. And then it's a conversation. So it's not just for the parents to answer, it's for the kids to actually answer first, right? Yeah. So how can we start our day off right? The kids can answer that first, and then the parents can add to that or help supplement whatever the kids don't have on target.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. That's great. Highly recommend that. I'm looking forward to getting that myself, because I know that I'm definitely going to use it, especially now knowing everything that you have put into that. You've created an incredible progression of conversations that absolutely need to happen in our homes. Adam, you brought this up, and I think that this is such a key point. I think this is something that we have missed as a society. We have put so much focus and intent on teaching kids, and even those before us teaching us, that you need to figure out what you want to do with your life. And we have just personalized everything so much to where it is just me and mine. When I grow up, what am I going to do? What's my career going to be? What are my plans? But God's design for men and women was not to just remain independent men and women. God told men and women to come together, to be married, to have kids, to have a family. And so I see that the greatest pinnacle of life is not necessarily just becoming an adult as a male, but it is then being married and then having children. And this is where the fun really happens. But we have not prepared young people to think, forward and say, it's going to be fun when you're in high school, and it's going to be fun when you're in college, and it's going to be fun when you get a job. But the best part of life is when you're married and you have children. When we haven't been forward thinking like that. So I'm curious with how can we shape these talks that we have with our kids to fit this forward thinking context of when you're married, this is beautiful. How do we get that into them when they're young?
Yeah. So the framework that we want to have is a celebration.
Okay.
When we approach these conversations, whether they're spontaneous or planned, we want to celebrate marriage, sexuality, relationships, because God does. That's the biblical framework of these things. It's celebration. And if we can approach it that way, then the way that we talk about looking forward to something, then it's going to be celebratory. It's not going to be this daunting, scary, oh, let's just say it real quick and get over it, because that's not what celebration looks like. It's positive anticipation. So that's the framework. If you can have that attitude going into it, that shifts a lot for you as a parent.
Also, more is caught than taught.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when you walk into that celebratory atmosphere, if that really is something, you're not just putting it on for your kids. If you've worked diligently to become a person that your spouse wants to be with, you're kind and you're gentle, and the fruit of the Spirit is evident in your life. That's going to come out with joy. All throughout Song of Solomon, you see joy as a central theme. Mm-hmm. It's around sexuality. Joy is a huge theme of joy of them being together, joy of them looking forward to going and doing things and being together, and the joy of seeing each other naked in their bodies. Like, joy is central. So I think that if you actually carve out space for each other. So, okay, let me take one step back. So many parents fret over their, if they're giving their kids enough attention, enough of this, enough of that, and, their spelling, is it good enough? And, their math equations, they didn't get an A. But not a lot of those parents that I've seen really fret about, are they getting quality time with their spouse? And I see that having a great family means that you really do have fertile soil. Your marriage is the fertile soil that the kids grow their roots into. Remember that they have all of their emotional framework for the world and relationships developed by age 7. That's why Aristotle said, give me a kid until he's 7 and I'll show you the man. That's because their frameworks are developed. So if you and your spouse are fighting and it's unsafe, you can tell them all you want of this is how you should live and stuff. But they are picking up all of the things that you're doing without you actually saying them. I mean, I find it amazing to me that, a kid can learn a language, a complex language, just by being around you.
Yeah.
Within 2, what else are they picking up that's not verbal? Yeah. So much more than that.
Yep.
So much more than that. So if I am just trying to get by with my wife and then teach all of my kids these excellent principles and how they should live and how they should see life, that's going to fall on deaf ears, because kinesthetic learning, or like what they see visually, is going to stick so much more than what you say. So I would say, seek to build a fertile flower bed of really fertile soil, which is your relationship with your wife, because that determines the peace a lot of times, the joy, that they watch you excited about your wife. I can give tips on this too. But if they can see that demonstrated, that gives them the opportunity to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And then to hear the principles on top of that, the explanation of what you're doing, rather than a complete dissonant advice over here, but they don't see you doing it.
Mm-hmm. And they like it when they see their parents being loving toward each other, even gushy toward each other. I mean, obviously, you're not going to be inappropriate in front of your kids. Like, there's obviously a lot that stays private, but them seeing the overflow of your intimacy is a good thing. Just last night, we were putting Adeline in bed, and we were kissing her, and she goes, "You both kissed me. Now kiss each other." And she's 7.
She did.
And she loves to see that mommy and daddy love each other. And even if, you have older kids and maybe you haven't established this rhythm of displaying affection in front of them, maybe they'll take cues from their friends and go, "Ew, no, don't do that in front of us," blah, blah, blah. They like it still. Do it anyway. It establishes security for them.
Well, if you haven't done it for a while, they might be awkward of like, this is different.
Right.
This is weird.
Yeah.
So make it not weird.
Yeah. That's right.
And keep it up, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Exactly. Well, if you want your kid to find an amazing other person that treats them well, that respects them, they have to have seen that modeled.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because what they find, I mean, this is called imago theory, but what they find is the person really that represents one of your parents or your parents put together, a lot of the attributes. So that's why you find kids from really rough homes finding someone that feels normal to them,
right,
from a really rough home. And then they, unless they break that cycle, that's what they're going to emulate and continue that cycle. So we have to be intentional about what we're demonstrating.
Hey, if you're a new dad or choosing to embark on a fresh start as a father, I have a gift for you. I wrote a book a while back called Cut the Crap, Direct Tips for Becoming a Dad. I don't teach you how to change a diaper. That one's totally on you. But I do talk about 5 elements that you need to focus on as a dad if you want to be the dad your children need you to be. Now, this is completely free. It is yours. There's no strings attached. The only thing that I'd like you to consider is if the book brings value to you as a father, make a contribution by going to fatheringourfuture.com/support. But you don't have to. Again, it is a free gift from me to you. The link is in the description after the end of the episode. Click it, get your copy, and I pray that it helps you. Everyone has an opinion on fatherhood, but there's only one place that we should actually look, and that's to God, our Father. That's why I wrote Following Our Father, a devotional for dads. In this, I cover 30 qualities and attributes of our Father in heaven that help us better understand our identity as dads. Each devotional is followed up with a daily step so that we can take the principles of our Father and immediately apply them to our own lives. This is a tool and a resource in your hands that will bless you. Click the link in the description and get yourself a copy of Following Our Father today. Let me two-part question this one.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to go back to what Karissa said and also to what you were just talking about, Adam.
Mm-hmm.
So, Karissa, one of the things that you focused on just previously was that sexuality is something that is celebrated scripturally.
Yeah.
Said no one ever in my entire life growing up as a young person, right? Sex was always, it's bad, you don't do it, and that's all you need to know. And you get married, then you can figure it all out. And that is all we were ever taught. It is abstinence and nothing else. It's bad until you're married, and then all of a sudden becomes good, which kind of, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I'm curious, throwing this both your way, how do we correct and refine this thinking that we probably have, the vast majority of us who grew up in Christian homes? We likely have this concept that sex is bad until you're married, and it's confusing. And that's probably created some sort of tension in our own marriage, but our marriage has to be this example for our kids. How do we go about reframing our understanding of sex as something that's worth celebrating and something that should be celebrated? and then living that out for our kids to see.
So there is a theologian that had an amazing quote. I need to memorize it. But he said something like, a lot of people act as though, God made the lungs and the heart and the hands and the eyes. And then the devil comes along and smacks the genitals on, like, try these on.
Sounds about right.
And that's kind of how I think we've been raised. It's like everything else is great, but let's not talk about that, or let's shame that, or don't touch that, or it's normally framed in the don't.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
So what I think have to do first as parents, we have to shift it. And you're absolutely right. We have to shift it as parents. If we're going to teach this correctly, then we have to have it straight in our own heads before we try to give it to them.
Sure.
And I think the first place is we have to go back to Genesis. They were in the garden. They were naked and unashamed. That's the first glimpse that we have at human sexuality, is that it wasn't good for a man to be alone. Yep. God made the woman, and she was beautiful, I'm sure, because God said multiply.
Yeah.
and he said, have a great time, pretty much. Dominate the what does he say? Take care of the garden, pretty much. Expand it. Subdue it. Yep. Expand the garden. But naked and unashamed was that mark. They were naked, which means that they were vulnerable and with each other, right? But also they were unashamed. And that means that they were playful. They were fun. Yeah. They had a good time. And it wasn't until sin entered the garden that they hid. And they didn't only hide from God, but they made coverings for themselves. They also were covering from each other. Right. They were hiding from each other. So I think that right there is a small snapshot of what happens in the marriages that we work with around sexuality, is that when sin enters the garden, we start to take on that shame and we lose playfulness. And we become sad and scared and worried about our own sexualities because we haven't been trained. And that is just played forward down through the centuries, unless we can go back to the Word of God and ask, God, what are you trying to show us through our bodies and creation? Because you can't just separate, the body from the spirit and the soul. Like, what are you trying to train us? God created it good. And then how are we supposed to understand that redemption of the sin entering into the garden?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. We've done surveys throughout the years, and we've asked the question, what was the attitude around sex in your family growing up? And at least 50% say it just was silent. It just was not talked about. At least another 25% or so say it was just bad, don't do it. And then there's usually a chunk that will say, I had the talk, but it was awkward and that was it. Too late. Yeah. And then a combination of the other things, like, and it's bad, don't do it. Less than 10% of the room, it's usually right around 9%. We've had that number pop up quite a few times, had the understanding that sex was a good gift from God to be celebrated in the covenant of marriage. Less than 10% of the room. One time we had one church that was 16% of the room. We had them all take the survey, and then the numbers pop up on the screen as they're taking the survey. And it's interesting to see the majority of the room had a very unhealthy discipleship around sexuality. So of course, we're there to help them like rewire their brains around sex and sexuality just within the context of the marriage, so that we can perpetuate a new narrative for the next generation.
Yeah.
And a lot of it starts with, like Adam said, understanding what scripture says about sex and sexuality. Starts in the beginning, and then it's not some sort of happenstance that Song of Solomon brings back the garden imagery and restores what was meant to be good. in Genesis, when everything fell. Now we have a really good glimpse of what that looks like. And again, it's a celebration. There's joy, there's positive anticipation and excitement. Even before they're married, there's positive anticipation and excitement.
And I find that Christian people are far more prudish than the Bible is.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So we're just like trying to rip the taboos off of this, when we're in marriage seminars, just like using words that they're not used to hearing, especially in a church, and talking about what scripture
like which ones, babe?
says. So giving them some insight into different ancient Hebrew love poetry, into different what stanzas mean, and what different comments and phrases mean, and how it's subtle, but it's there. And if we understood that, I think we have a lot more liberty in our own sexual relationship, in the covenant of marriage. How beautiful, what a gift that God gave us. And so there's understanding what it says scripturally, having these conversations regularly with your spouse. And you've shared before on your podcast, we created card decks for that, where, sexpectations, talk about your sexuality with your spouse on a regular basis. Play fun games with your spouse in the bedroom. That can be risky because there's a lot of junk out there, and that's why a lot of people avoid that. But we created sensations for that. It's a fun game that engages all 5 senses. And everything is Song of Solomon approved. So enjoy.
Yeah. And what? I think what's interesting about that, or important about that, is that it is top down. It doesn't just start from me to my kids.
That's right.
It has to start from the source, God, to me and my wife's relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then from this health and like healthy standpoint, then it's disseminated to the kids. So get on the same page with your wife. Have these conversations. I'm sure she's dying to have them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. I'm curious, since you're both, counseling people with marriage all the time, and this is all you focus on, is sex the greatest struggle that couples have that you deal with, or is there anything that tops that?
People think sex is their greatest struggle if they're in a negative space. So the studies show that couples who are in a negative space attribute at least 50 to 70% of the issue to their sex life. Couples who are in a positive space say that sex is about 15% of the goodness in their relationship.
Wow.
So when it's bad, it's really bad. When it's good, it's seen as an outgrowth of all the goodness that's already in the relationship.
Okay.
And that's what we find in our work with couples as well.
Right. So if you have a safe bond, you have sex. But you have no sex, you have no safe bond. So there is a cycle to it.
Sure.
So there has to be like a leaning toward, they have to feel that you're genuinely leaning in, attuned to their needs and safe. When that happens, or feel appreciated. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, sex happens as a byproduct. It's only the world that says you can have all the sex you want, and and no strings attached. But honestly, that's bad sex. That's all full of lies. It's really not what the human being needs. It needs connection, deep connection, love, acceptance. That's really where we find so many of the needs met, is within the sanctity and within marriage.
Yeah,
it's super interesting on the thought process of human beings in marriages on sex. Let me backtrack a little bit here and ask you this. This was something that Karissa, you and I were talking about prior to launching into this episode. I have taken recommendations to talk to my kids as early as the age of 8 about sex and sexuality. And I've heard that number repeated and recommended multiple times. Now, I think it's interesting that your card deck is for ages 3 and up. Mm-hmm. So why do you recommend to start so early?
As early as your kids can start talking about their elbow, they can start talking about other parts of their body.
Their penis.
And if we separate those two so much and wait until kids are, preteens, that's what happens for people who do get the talk. Usually it's a preteen talk. Sure. And then it's too late. I mean, imagine going on to a football field as a football player, all padded up with a helmet, ready to go, and you've never played football before. And you're on the field, the game's about to start, and your coach says, all right, so this is what football is. The goal is score some points, get the ball over the line, don't get tackled, and here's how plays work. Let me give you all the 20 different plays. I mean, can you imagine? That would not be a good coach.
That kid's going to get smashed.
And that's how we approach sexuality discipleship sometimes. 8 is an age that you hear often because age 8 is the average age of first exposure to pornography right now. And it's getting younger and younger because of devices that are just kind of thrown at kids. Wow. And it's not like parents are malicious and wanting their kids to be exposed. Sure. They get exposed because they have devices. They live in a world where pornography is blasted on billboards. I mean, even if you are completely sheltering your kids, discipleship is still necessary. Yeah. So it's not a matter of if they'll ever be exposed, because they will. It's just a matter of when. Yeah. So yes, age 8 is the average age of first exposure. But if that's average, that means a good chunk of kids are getting exposed prior to age 8. And, we don't want to be the intervention always. We want to be the prevention as well, preventing a negative and erroneous concept of sexuality in our children.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you didn't have the conversation, Anthony, but did you go and ask your dad questions about sex?
Never.
Why?
He never initiated anything. So
well, he doesn't have to initiate it. Why didn't you go ask him?
It just did not feel like, because it was never ever discussed. It just never felt like it was appropriate to talk about.
And this is exactly how every kid feels. I had the same thing. I had one conversation when I was like, I don't know.
You said 11.
I think it was 11.
Yeah.
I think it was maybe even a little bit later than that. But I'd already had a ton of questions that I asked my friends because True. I didn't feel my dad was a great man, good man. Little nervous about him, but I didn't go to him because, man, I just had a bad feeling about that. I didn't want his disapproval. Like, why are you asking now? Like I just saw that happening. And this is how your kids feel about you if you haven't brought up this conversation, because they get that gut feel of like, that's not safe. We've talked about everything else, but not that. So that's not safe. And now kids know how to do, hey, Siri.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Watching my phone. Yeah. And they can ask, what is a blank? And have everything show up. I mean, who in their right mind is going to leave the front door open and just walk away and hope that no one's going to come through it? No, everybody's going to take that extra step and make sure it's secure and lock the door. So many of us are leaving our kids open to whoever wants to walk through and inform them of what they've been missing out. And one curious question can lead them down that path. And they're not going to come to you, especially after they see a whole bunch of stuff that excites them and at the very same time shames them. Mm-hmm. Oh, I did something bad. I can't show my parents or tell my parents. I'm going to keep it a secret. And this is how our addiction starts. Mm-hmm. So what we're trying to advocate for is not crass or crude, or it's really simply, and people kind of blow conversations and make it way too big. Mm-hmm. What we want to say is it's simple as answering questions that come up naturally, of channeling a natural, Dad, what is this? Oh, that is a super good question. What do you think that is? By the way, that's a really good tip. Ask a question before you answer. Jesus always did it. And I think it's a good way of doing it as well.
And that's why having the talks is, asking questions of them.
Right.
One example, just to put this out there, like we mentioned having talks prior to age 8, even as young as 3. Yeah. And so you're not going to have the same conversations with a 3-year-old as you are with a 17-year-old. That's
For
obvious. Just developmentally, cognitively, they can't comprehend the same things that a teenager can. But this is a conversation that we've had with our kids as young as, I think we started talking about this at 3 and 4. I just pulled a card. So have you ever touched parts of your body in a way that felt good to you? Well, a 3 and 4-year-old might say, yeah, like I scratch my itch, or like when you put your fingers through my hair. If that's
Right.
all that's on their mind, that's great. Ask it again at 5 and 6. They might start talking about how sometimes they touch their private parts in a way that feels good to them. Do we have to use the word masturbation yet? No, but let's use it when it starts becoming more of a central focus. If you see them touching themselves more, that's actually called masturbation. This is how it works, and it makes people feel good. And it's something that it's not appropriate to touch ourselves. It's very private. It's a private body part. So we don't touch ourselves when like you're at school or you're with friends. When you're in the shower and you're washing that part of your body, that's appropriate. But it's also not appropriate for anyone else to touch you. And so you're having a couple of conversations in one, obviously not at that pace. That was very quick. So it's slow. But on the other side of the card, the butterfly side, what is masturbation and have you ever masturbated?
Yeah.
So that's for an older kid, right?
Wow.
So we're having these conversations, and if you don't have the conversation with them, someone else will. Google will.
It's incredible, but I always kind of like what I did to you, Anthony. I simply, parents are like, whoa, that's a big question, right? But then I pull back from that and say, man, if you had a really open open communication and friendship with your parents, and they asked you those questions, and you could tell they were not judgmental, they were loving, and they were simply there for you to challenge you and to give you what's true and what's not. Because wouldn't that make you feel good? Wouldn't that, wouldn't that have helped probably avoid some things?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For me, my personal story, oh yes, man, if I would have had a better just guidance in my sexuality around girls and around what to do with my desires and all these things, boy, that would have avoided a lot of pain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you might feel a little queasy probably just because that wasn't in your upbringing.
For sure.
But that doesn't mean that it's not a better way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and when you start having these conversations early, to go back to your original question here, like why earlier, you give them a clear understanding for so many other questions and conversations that may not have directly to do with sex. For instance, I was just thinking about yesterday. So our daughter's 7, our son is 5. And yesterday, Adeline was like, Mommy, I know you. Ask me any question about you. And I was like, okay, what's my first name? She's like, Karissa. I was like, what's my middle name? She goes, wait, what is it? And she was like, Horton. And I'm like, no, that's my maiden name. And she's like, so we got to my middle name. It's Jean. And I said, and that's Grandma's middle name. That's Grammy's middle name. And that's my middle name. And then I could see it on her face. Like, okay, so it went down each generation. Why is that not my middle name? My daughter's middle name, Adeline. And I explained to her, I said, did you know Mommy was actually pregnant before I had you? And we actually miscarried. That means that the baby passed away inside my uterus. And so we start having this conversation about miscarriage. Oh, wait, so I had a sister? And, so I explained how we named her middle name Jean. And she was like, so I had a sister? And I was like, well, she never was born. I said I miscarried her, which means she passed away inside my uterus. But yes, she was the first baby that we had. Now she has a framework for that. She doesn't have this question of like, wait, what does that mean? She was inside your uterus and she wasn't outside and she wasn't born. No, because she already understands that a baby's inside the uterus, not inside a stomach. Because we've never said that to our kids. We've said the uterus from the very time they could talk and see that a lady was pregnant. We've said uterus. And so that's what our son says. Like, oh, Auntie so-and-so's pregnant. That means that she has a baby in her uterus?
Now, this doesn't mean that sometimes they absolutely embarrass us.
Oh, yeah. That's for sure. But so there's a framework for it. Like, I didn't have to explain human anatomy while I was trying to explain to my daughter that I miscarried.
Yeah.
Because she already knew that from the age of 3.
Yeah.
Yep.
No,
So it gives them framework.
No, I think that's awesome. And yeah, like the card that you pointed out, like just boldface asking your kid, like, have you ever masturbated? Like, I mean, I'm thinking about that. Like, if I was a kid and my parent had asked me that, I'd have been like, I don't want to have this conversation anymore.
I'm out.
Yeah, like someone's calling me. I gotta go. So, like, yeah, I mean, but in as much seriousness as I can conjure up here, I do see the value in actually having these conversations, asking these questions, but also receiving the answers in a way, like Adam, that you said, that's not judgmental. This is not intended to cast shame. This is intended to disciple your kids. Like, this gives you an opportunity to have the conversation in this context about masturbation. But I think the beautiful thing, and we've hinted at this all throughout this conversation, is that from a very early age, we are establishing safe environments for communications with our kids so that they're comfortable talking about even failures, even mistakes, and they just come to us and they have these conversations. I think that's really good. Let me recap with this, and I want to ask you one more thing. 3 things that I've picked up from our conversation. One, we as married couples have to make sure that we focus first on our marriage, because this is going to be what teaches our children so much about the beauty of marriage and everything that comes with it. We have to talk about sex and sexuality early on. We just mentioned 3 is as soon as your kids can talk, start having the conversations. And a big thing that I think is super important that was definitely missed on our generation that we need to establish in ours is that is when we speak about sex, we speak about it with joy and in a context of celebration. Is there any last thing that you feel is vital for dads and parents to know about having these talks with their kids outside of that?
I think be curious.
Okay.
I think that is the most important, one of the least underrated ways of going about something is just be curious. If we could do that with friendships, we'd have more friends.
For sure.
If we could be more curious with our spouses, we'd have better marriages. If we could be more curious with our kids, we'd have better relationships with our kids. And less things would be off limits in their minds to talk about with their parents. Because you want to be the first person they come to if they mess up. Yeah. You want to also be the first person they come to before they mess up with the question. So if we can simply just be curious and loving, I think that would really, really help us not to sexually abandon our kids. Because I think that's a lot of men feel of like, I was just left to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is just not a recipe for health, especially in this very sexually confused world.
Yeah. This has been, do you have something to say, Karissa?
I would just say I agree with that. And I think having these conversations with our kids early is one point that we emphasized. And one other point I would emphasize is just often, early and often.
That's good.
You don't have to force it. It'll happen. Just look for the opening.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. This has been absolutely fantastic. Before we say our goodbyes, however you go about it, would you mind closing us out with a word of prayer?
Sure.
Okay.
Lord, thank you so much for this time with Anthony on the podcast, Fathering Our Future. I pray for all the fathers, and even if this episode is shared with their wives, I pray for these parents right now who are listening and who are eager to disciple their kids the way that you've planned for them and designed them to disciple their kids. If sexuality is hard for them to talk about on their own, I pray that you would let this episode today ignite a fire in this couple listening, that they would feel comfortable and ready to be vulnerable, to expose themselves to each other and open up about their own sexuality and understanding. I just pray for your presence to be in the midst of them as they open up and have these conversations.
God, thank you for the men that are listening and the women. I thank you, Jesus, that for their hunger to be dads. that do well with their kids. God, I pray that you would give them the courage, help them to see themselves truly. God, I pray that you'd help them to see their faults, but not only that, help them to see where they're winning and to celebrate that, to encourage them. This is a hard world. It's a hard life sometimes. Give them the strength and the encouragement. Help them to see themselves truly and see where the little ways, not the grandiose ways, but the little ways that they can make a big difference in their marriages and their kids and their families' lives. And I pray they'd help them to prioritize well and let them just to make that difference, Jesus, that they want to see. I pray that you would just bless with them and be with them in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
It's always a blast to have my friends Adam and Karissa on the podcast and just be able to talk about things and life. And in this case, we talked about sex and talking about sex with your kids, and that was a lot of fun. I want to give you the 3 takeaways one more time because I think it is crucial that we just get this cemented into our minds. The first thing is make sure you focus on your marriage. Your marriage is going to be a beautiful example to your children, and they're going to learn so much just from seeing you and your wife together. So make sure you prioritize and value your marriage. Talk about sex and sexuality to your kids early and often. Remember, this is not a one and done type deal. This is not the talk. I hope if anything has happened throughout this series that I have done is that I have been able to dismantle this bad idea of this naming convention that we have of the talk singular, because that is not what this is. Discipleship is an ongoing process, and discipleship includes various topics. Sex falls under that umbrella. This is not something that we talk about once. We talk about it early, and we talk about it often. And the last thing is make sure that whenever you speak about sex and sexuality with your kids, that you do so within a context of joy and celebration. God created sex. It is a beautiful thing. It is a great thing. And our children don't need to grow up the way that we grew up, thinking that it was bad and that they had to stay away from it and that it was wrong and that it was sinful and just everything negative surrounded the topic of sex. Let's raise our children to have a beautiful understanding that God created sex, and He created sex for them, and it is a gift. Let's do this together. Let's make a difference in this upcoming generation. Let's truly work together and father our future. I want you to know that you are a difference maker. You are a dynasty builder. You are a dad. You've got this. Stay committed. Be all in. Stay faithful. If you need help along the way, and we all do, I want you to know that I'm here for you. You can reach me with your questions or your concerns or your challenges, fatheringourfuture@gmail.com. I will be happy to hear from you and happy to help. Thank you so much for being with me. This is Fathering Our Future. I'm Anthony Vandegrift, and I hope you'll join me next time. Hey, one more time, I want to thank you for listening to Fathering Our Future. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, please do so wherever you listen and consider leaving a nice review because I would appreciate that. But if you're not connected to Fathering Our Future on social media, you can find it on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and there you're going to get some additional content on a more regular basis that you don't always get here on the podcast. Now, the last thing that I would like to ask of you is that you would consider becoming a financial partner of Fathering Our Future, because dads make a difference, and dads are not disposable. Dads are vital, and they are essential, and they are needed. And the impact that dads make doesn't just reside in the home, but it has a ripple effect that goes to churches and communities and culture. And I'm inviting you to be a part of equipping and empowering and educating dads to be the dad that God has called them to be and that their children need them to be. You can become a financial partner with Fathering Our Future. It can be a one-time contribution, a monthly commitment, but by doing that, you play a direct role in impacting dads. You can check the link in the description below. You can pray about it. You can get on board. And I thank you in advance for becoming a part of Fathering Our Future in a special and a dynamic way. God bless you.